Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is from the corner of your eye in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 36, Konoha Crush, Part 9. We must be careful in our attacks. Why? Because we do not wish to hurt Ino, says Shino, and that's the exact thought that makes Kiba hang back. The puppeteer that smells of poison and other things that make Kiba's nose twitch might be dismissive of Ino's chances, might be dismissive of the fact that she's still alive and kicking, but he doesn't attack head-on. He hangs back, his puppet guided by the twitches of his fingers and attracting the fucked-up glass demon's attention, dodging blows and creating a distraction. Naruto's clones, too, are an easy way to fight without really fighting. They poof so easily, and it seems like Naruto can make so many of them. Which would be crazy, would be really strange cause it's Naruto. But Kiba's always known about Naruto. He glances over at the blonde, who is deep in thought about something. Akamaru can always tell people's chakra levels, always has and always will be able to, and so Kiba's known that Naruto's basically made of chakra since like, day one. And scary chakra, too. Which again, Naruto, weird. The demon thing makes it all make sense, so cool. Kiba's glad to have that mystery he never really cared about solved. Shino buzzes next to Kiba, but he can't really do anything here, either. It's not like he can drain a demon of chakra, and Kiba doesn't think his teammate has any bugs that eat glass. Which would be like, way cool though. And Kiba doesn't really want to get in there with Akamaru and either fuck the demon up, which means fucking Ino up, or get fucked up themselves. Temari, who reminds Kiba of Hana, which makes sense, swings her fan and the gust of air sends the glass demon stumbling back into a few trees, and Kiba wonders if Ino feels that. The puppet's stomach sword chips some glass off of the demon's cheek, and Kiba wonders if that's gonna leave a mark. Guys, says Naruto, and he looks serious. I'm gonna summon a toad to fight Gaara. Shino and Kiba exchange looks of alarm, both on the same team wavelength. Dude, Kiba says. We don't wanna hurt him. Would your toad hurt him? Kiba has absolutely no idea how dangerous toads are. Naruto contemplates it, really thinks, and Shino shakes his head. No. Why? Because if you have to think about it, it will be too dangerous. Just do some demon stuff or something, Kiba says, and they both look at him. Shino expressionless but definitely conveying the typical emotion of what the hell, Kiba and Naruto wide-eyed and kinda vulnerable in a way that makes Kiba really uncomfortable. You know. I don't know what demon stuff you can do, but since you're a demon or whatever, if you can do that stuff and fight and not hurt Ino, I say do it. Shino nods, sharply. Yes. My bugs are not going to assist much against him, and I am uncomfortable engaging with Taijutsu with the demon. Which is totally Shino talk for how on earth do you use your fists against a glass demon, which is fair but also really funny, and Kiba snickers. Naruto's still got that uncomfortable vulnerable look, and there might genuinely be tears glistening in his eyes, which makes Akamaru whimper a little because oh boy. You dash. Konohans, the puppeteer yells back with a glare, and oh, all of Naruto's clones popped. Are you gonna do something or just stand around and talk? Naruto's face hardens into resolve. Yeah, he says, and his hands form a familiar sign. Multiple shadow clone jutsu, he roars. There's smoke, so much smoke, like a fire is right in his face, and Kiba coughs and covers his nose to try to block it out, but it's pointless, it doesn't linger. It was just a technique, and it fades quickly to show. Naruto. Just. Naruto. Every single visible inch of space is occupied by a Naruto, by hundreds of them, and the Sand Genin's jaws drop in astonishment and even the glass demon stills, surprised. Let's go, the original Naruto yells, and with a roar, they rush the demon. She's so tired, so achingly tired, and it feels like one moment she's closing her eyes for just a second and the next, Karin is kneeling in front of her, pressing the back of her hand to Sakura's forehead. Sakura blinks, confused, and a tiny smile appears on the redhead's face. You're awake, she says. Thank goodness. Hinata is behind her, and it's clear the other girl is exhausted. In fact, neither of them look well. Sakura's brow furrows. What happened to you? They glance at each other, and then Hinata sits very carefully, cross-legged, and Karen glances away. Kabuto. We fought Kabuto. Her tiredness evaporates in a single instance, and Sakura sits up straight, pulling her hand from Ino's and ignoring the spring of tears to her eyes at the movement. Sasuke. Where's Sasuke? Neither of the girls look her in the eye, and her heart drops. No, please, no. Where's Sasuke? Kabuto took him, Hinata whispers, oh so softly, and Sakura feels like she's gonna throw up, like she's going to bend over and weep and lose her breakfast all at the same time, but Karen speaks. That Proctor's getting him, Sakura, she says, and she says it with such fierce determination that Sakura's breath catches in her throat, meeting the other girl's red eyes head on. She has no idea whether Karen believes her own words, but even if she doesn't, she seems determined to make Sakura believe them. The one from the second exam. She went after him. Anko. Mitarashi Anko. First, she saved Sakura from death at the hands of the Sand Jounin, now, she's saving Sasuke, and Sakura feels a rush of gratitude that's so overwhelming. She needs to get her a gift basket or something like that when this is all over with. Okay, she says. Okay. There's nothing she can do right now, God, Sakura doesn't even know if she can stand up, so she needs to believe that Anko will bring Sasuke back to her, safe and sound. Naruto is fine. She trusts Naruto to be fine, she needs to. Kakashi-sensei, well, he's Kakashi-sensei. He'll be fine. She knows he must be, because the idea of anything else happening to her crazy, enigmatic teacher is so strange. So that just leaves. Sakura glances to her side, to where her best friend is slumped against the wall, still terrifyingly unconscious. There's a cut on her cheek, now, a drop of blood dripping down her cheek, and it frightens her. Kakashi-sensei, Naruto, please stay safe. Sakura thinks, as Hinata and Karen settle down to lean against the wall next to her, all three girls exhausted beyond belief. Sasuke, Ino. Please come back to me. She reaches out gently, towards the small Gaara. It'll be okay, she says, because he's not doing nothing more but crying, and as soon as Ino touches his shoulder, he crumples into nothing. Ino can do nothing more but blink for a moment, staring in surprise, before she's aware of someone else nearby and she scrambles to her feet, whirling around. It's Gaara, except this is the Gaara that she knows, the one that's her age and absolutely terrifying, and he levels her with a look that makes her skin crawl. It's like, she's a puzzle, maybe, but one that he's willing to rip to shreds to understand, and Ino really doesn't wanna die here. Gaara, she says, managing to keep her voice neutral, and he continues to watch her. And then, after a moment, he speaks. It'll be okay, he says, and his voice isn't comforting. It's flat, but there's a hint of something behind the words that make Ino feel very wary. Why did you say that? Ino needs to choose her words very carefully. Or at least, maybe she should, but... The mind? This is her playing field. Because I wanted to make you feel better, she says, and she's honest. You were crying and I didn't know why, and I wanted to make you feel better. There's a crack in the mask he's wearing, something simmering below the surface, behind even the terrifying look in his eyes. Ino barely gets a chance to analyze it, though, because Gaara is rushing at her, faster than she's seen him move so far, but he doesn't have his sand, doesn't have anything like that, and so he physically throws himself at Ino, and for a minute, they're two genin tussling with each other on top of the water, rolling around like they're two kids roughhousing and not two genin who don't really know taijutsu to save their lives. Gaara gets on top for a split second, and it's all he needs to wrap his hands around her neck and squeeze, and Ino can't breathe. She's struggling for air, trying to gasp, chakra control flickering as she falls into the water, and that means she can't breathe all the more, and she grasps for something, anything, and her hand wraps around Gaara's wrist. He lets go of her like she's burned him, and she kicks him off and pushes up into fresh air, sucking it in as she tries to breathe before Gaara comes at her again. But he doesn't. And when Ino finally feels like she's not going to die, has enough air in her, and looks up, Gaara's staring at his wrist where she touched him, wide-eyed. It's the least terrifying expression he's worn thus far, and Ino's ready to capitalize on that. Gaara, she says, and he snaps his eyes up to meet hers. He looks like a caged animal. A caged animal, one who is trapped and yet. Ino, suddenly, knows what she needs to do. She hadn't planned for this, when she used her jutsu. Hadn't planned on coming into his head and talking with this boy, with this terrifying, yet lost boy, and she hadn't prepared anything. She's my friend, and I won't let you hurt her, had been her one coherent thought. And now, she stares at this boy, and thinks I don't want anyone to hurt you, either. Ino knows the signs of abuse. She does. She's seen them in classmates, and reported them to her father, and she's seen them around Konoha. It's important to recognize the symptoms of abuse from the symptoms of the trauma that go with shinobi life. Sometimes, that's something that T and I need to exploit, other times, it's something that T and I need to deal with. She knows trauma, she knows abuse, and she knows. Gaara, from the little she's seen, wears his sand like a covering. She had seen it crack when Sakura had attacked, had seen how he had been wearing it, and for him to react like this to her touching him. In a place where he has no sand. They're within reach of each other, and so Ino sits on top of the water. Folds her legs once more, and keeping eye contact with Gaara, holds out her hand. Palm out, fingers splayed. She waits. Ino has all the time in the world, she knows of no way out of here, and she doesn't have anything else she can be doing. So she waits while slowly Gaara uncurls and slowly, presses his hand against her own. Chapter 37, Konoha Crush, Part 10. Ino isn't sure how long the two of them sit there, palm to palm, staring across at each other. Gaara seems content to be quiet, and Ino isn't certain how to phrase her question. How do you just ask something like this? Especially when talking to someone who isn't on the same wavelength at all. In the end, she just goes for it. Gaara, she says. What's wrong? And the sudden rush of memories is overwhelming. She's alone. She's alone, completely alone, no matter what she does, no one wants to play with her. Touch her. Look at her. Father stops Kankura and Temari from playing with her, and the next time she sees them, they're so scared of her and she wonders what he told them, what was said to make them so afraid. Yoshimaru is the only one who speaks to her kindly, is the only one who doesn't hurt her, and an unfamiliar feeling, love, Gaara, that's love, swells up in her chest every time he speaks to her, spends time with her, and she wants to give Yoshimaru the whole world. Anything she can. She'll be the best child ever, just for him. And then Yoshimaru tries to kill her and she's so alone again, and she hurts. It's her and mother and they won't hurt anymore. No. She'll hurt others, she'll love herself, and it's all she needs, that's all that's necessary, right? She feels the burble of mother's agreement in the back of her mind, the bloodlust, and the urge to kill, and she listens. She kills the people who try to kill her, and sometimes she kills even more than that. If she didn't kill, no one would know she was here. They don't talk to her. They don't see her. She drifts through the streets every night, all alone, and curls up in her room during the day, all alone. Father makes her train with Temari and Kankura and Baki, but they're scared. So scared, but they at least see her. Talk to her. Even if they're scared, they do that, and it's the only reason that she doesn't kill them. And then she stands across the battlefield and it's Chuji, eyeing her down, and he's my friend, and I won't let you hurt him. And she's in the hospital, facing Chuji and herself, and they're my friend, and I won't let you hurt them. And then it's her against Sakura and she screams because she hurts so much and she can't remember the last time she's hurt like this, and no one stops her from being hurt, and she just wants to hurt everyone else, too. And then it's Ino and Gaara sitting on the water in the depths of Gaara's mind, and Ino pulls her hand back and starts to weep. Why are you crying? Gaara asks, pulling his hand back to himself, and Ino shakes her head because she doesn't think she has words, doesn't know how to communicate, to make sounds shape into coherency off of her tongue. Why are you crying? He asks again, more insistent. Because she hiccups, wiping at the tears that won't stop coming, and looks up at him through her blurred vision. I'm sorry, Gaara. His face grows blank. Sorry. You hurt so much. I'm sorry, she sniffles, wipes her eyes. No one was there, and I'm sorry. He stares at her, uncomprehending. Ino doesn't understand, not at all. How no one was there. How everyone just ignored him. She wouldn't have if she was there. She would have reached out, Or maybe she wouldn't have. Because she remembers a little boy in her class that adults would murmur about, who truly had no one, and even though that little boy is now a genin. No, Ino realizes with shame, she wouldn't have been any better than the people who ignored Gaara. He stares at her like she's a puzzle, like she's something strange he doesn't know how to react to, how to decipher at all, but there's a glint of something behind his gaze that makes her hopeful. Why, he croaks. What does Gaara think about caring? Ino has to think. Love, Yoshimaru had said that he loved him, and Yoshimaru had taken care of him, but given the volatile emotions Ino had felt around that was probably not the best mind to stumble into. Also, she doesn't really want to lie and say that she loves Gaara. Or there's the impressions that her team has given him, they're my friend, and I won't let you hurt them. But Gaara isn't her friend, and Ino wants to be honest. Because you're a person, and I don't think people should be hurt like that, she admits. It's one thing if you're hurt fighting, that happens. And sometimes, people hurt others. Sometimes it's on accident, and sometimes you're angry and it's on purpose. But she studies the water in front of her, but forces herself to look up and meet his gaze. When you get hurt, you should have someone who cares. Someone who holds you or bandages your wounds or helps, however they can. The image of tenderly putting a band-aid on Yoshimaru's finger flits through. I'm sorry you didn't have anyone like that. That you don't. Ino scoots forward, and very carefully reaches out to offer her hand. Not like before, but to hold hands. He stares at her hand as though it's both poison and an antidote, all at once. Do you want to try being friends, Gaara? She doesn't know if it's this simple. None of this is therapy, none of it will help Gaara with the myriad issues that he clearly needs to work through, but that's not what Ino's trying to do. Sometimes, you just need a single hand to pull yourself back from the brink. Ino's seen it before. There's no such thing as healing from trauma, not really, not here, but you can cope. But you can't cope alone. He stares at her hand for a moment longer, and then at her, and Ino can tell that he doesn't understand, not really. He doesn't grasp that caring should be such a simple thing, that she does genuinely want to help, any of that. No. And that's okay. Because he reaches forward and takes her hand anyway. Okay, he whispers. The glass demon stills. Temari realizes immediately and stops. Stop, she yells as well, and Kankura ceases the dancing of his puppet and the demon boy's clones come crashing to a halt on various branches, a few missing or just unable to stop themselves in time and poofing out. There's so many of them, even after the amount that has crashed upon Gaara's glass and destroyed themselves, that it doesn't really matter. The demon that is Gaara is still, and Temari holds her breath. One by one, the Konoha boys land lightly on her branch, and the bug boy with the glasses glances at her. You have asked us to stop. Why? Because you believe your brother is in control. She shakes her head. I don't know, but maybe that Konoha girl wasn't suicidal after all, maybe she didn't get eaten by Shukaku or killed by her brother, maybe she was able to do something and maybe she just plain gave up and left and Gaara's battling Shukaku for dominance right now. Temari has no idea, but she doesn't want to hurt him if he's trying to win. Slowly, glass begins to flake off, crashing to the ground around them, slowly, and then all at once, until it's a cascade of glass falling to the ground and Temari can see her brother in that mix, see him falling among the glass as the demon splits into nothingness, and she doesn't even think. Doesn't even breathe. Temari pushes off the branch. She doesn't care about the glass shards that rain down, the way they cut her arms and her clothes and her legs, doesn't care about the fact that she has to leave her fan behind and the fact that this might be incredibly suicidal. She moves, and she catches Gaara, safely cradled in her arms, and she lands on the ground with a jolt. It was a long jump, to get her out of the way of the glass, and her legs collapse underneath her the moment she lands but Kankura is right there, suit cut up and blood running down his cheek but he doesn't care, letting Temari lean against him as she holds Gaara. Gaara opens his eyes, and he stares at the both of them. Temari. Kankura, His gaze shifts to her, specifically. Why are you crying? Oh. She hadn't realized she was crying, but she is, tears welling up in her eyes and sliding down her cheeks, and she shakes her head. You're my baby brother, she says, and she doesn't care how mad he might get at that, or whatever reaction there might be. I'm glad you're okay. His eyes shift over to Kankura, and her brother nods. Yeah, he says, and something feels, there's a weight to this scene, and she's glad the Konohans are staying back. You would, his voice rasps so awfully. You would care if I got hurt. Hearing that is so sad, so fucking sad, and Kankura turns slightly to rub at his eyes. And what did that girl say to Gaara? But really, it doesn't matter what was said. When has Gaara talked to anyone? Yes, Temari says, and she means every word. We would care if you got hurt, Gaara. Oh, he says, and then he joins his siblings in tears. Ino stirs with a groan, and immediately, there's a clash of familiar voices that washes over her as she struggles to open her eyes. Her body stings from a few cuts, and feels like it's been run over by a train. Her head pounds, and the light makes it even worse as she squints. It's Hinata, Karen, and Sakura, all right there, and Ino relaxes. Their voices echo over each other, too many people talking at once, but she can figure out the gist of what they're asking by piecing together the fragments. Ino, are you okay? She pushes herself up so she's sitting upright, and casts her gaze over the others. Karen looks exhausted. Hinata looks like she's been through the ringer. Sakura's eyes are puffy, like she's been doing some major crying, and she looks just as shit as she had been when Ino left her. I'm okay, she says, as if she hadn't just done the scariest thing in the entire world. She looks down at her hands, remembers the touch of palm against palm, fingers against fingers, and she shakes. I'm okay, she says, and tears are welling up in her eyes, and Hinata's hand is on her shoulder and Karen's hand is on her knee, and Sakura leans into her side and Ino buries her face in her hands and hiccups. She had thought she had exhausted her tears, with Gaara, but she supposes those had been fake tears, imaginary ones, not real ones that her body is making. I was so scared, she admits, and she sniffles and weeps into the warmth of her friends. Chapter 38, Konoha Crush, Part 11. The smoke clears, and Chuji holds his breath, but he's so relieved to see Kimimaro, slumped over in the stone arms. His tail is gone, and that strange skin color is fading away to reveal his normal paleness. Kurane-sensei melts out of the wall right next to him, and gently lifts up his drooping head to check. After a moment of examination, she speaks. He's unconscious, and everyone relaxes. She straightens up and gives Asuma-sensei a look that communicates what words do not, and he nods. Her hands form a seal, the stone arms falling away, and she scoops Kimimaro over her shoulder and disappears. Asuma-sensei turns to them. All right, he says, putting his hands on his hips and surveying the fallen kids. Chuji slumps into Shikamaru, and Niji and Tenten lean into each other, holding hands. So, who needs some medical attention first? Chuji, says Shika. Chuji, says Tenten. Akimichi, says Niji. Chuji turns to blink at him, but Niji isn't looking at him, frowning down at his lap. Niji, he says, and he does his best to say it kindly, because that did kind of surprise him. You can call me Chuji. Niji seems to mull this over for a second, before he nods, still not looking up, even as Asuma-sensei kneels before Chuji. All right, he says after a moment. Chuji is the one who needs the most immediate medical attention. It makes Chuji smile, even as the boy's expression gets a little strained when Asuma-sensei takes his right arm to start examining the wounds. He's really not a big fan of the doctor, and it's a little bit embarrassing to be the one who needs to get checked out. Hey, Asuma-sensei, Shikamaru says. You and Kurane-sensei seemed close. Chuji feels a rush of affection for his best friend. He's definitely doing this as a distraction, and it helps, even as Asuma-sensei reaches into a pouch at his side and pulls out a mini med pack. Yeah, Asuma-sensei says, and oh ho ho, it's very intentionally casual. We are pretty close. But not like, dating close, right? Shika asks, eyes flickering over to the side when Chuji hisses as Asuma-sensei dabs some sort of stinging ointment on the gouges on his arm. I thought I saw you and that crazy proctor hanging out once or twice. Anko. Asuma-sensei's eyes twinkle. Shikamaru, are you asking after your sensei's dating life? Tenten snickers softly and Chuji is, of course, a traitor. He and Ino keep arguing about whether you're dating Kurane-sensei or Anko. Shikamaru elbows him, but then quickly apologizes when Chuji hisses in pain. Sorry. Asuma-sensei shakes his head. Well, he says, pulling away the stinging cotton ball of ointment and pulling out some bandages instead. You're both right. Shikamaru and Chuji have twin frowns of confusion. Both. I'm dating both of them, and they're dating each other. All three of us are together. Oh, says Chuji, and they both go quiet as Asuma-sensei wraps up his arm. Tenten's still quietly amused in the background. And then, finally, Shikamaru speaks again. I didn't know you could do that. He sounds absolutely, 100% affronted by this lack of information, by his lack of knowing, and Asuma-sensei laughs. After a moment, Chuji joins in, so does Tenten, and Shikamaru shakes his head at his own foolishness. And Chuji thinks he even sees Niji smile. It's a good end to a really fucked up day. Oh. Wait. Actually. Hey, Asuma-sensei, Chuji says, and he glances at Shikamaru, finds the same moment of realization in there. We came to find you to tell you something, before they got tricked, before they got caught up in a fight, before they were desperately trying not to die. That genin, Kabuto? He's working for Orochimaru, and he's trying to get Sasuke. Lady Hanabi, Lee has decided, is a bright and joyous youthful child. She giggles and claps and crows delightedly in Lee's ear as he runs and runs, careful not to go his full speed because KO is right beside him, but still fast. She is so very different from both Niji and Hinata, and Lee wonders why. He can guess the difference between her and Niji. But her and Hinata. Your father is just up ahead, KO says, and it's like Lee is holding a completely different girl. I see, she says, and she no longer has a smile. She no longer laughs, she does not clap, she simply holds fast to Lee's back and her face is completely blank. Lady Hanabi? Lee asks, concerned, glancing back at her, but KO just shakes his head softly. Oh. He supposes that her father can see them, if he so wanted to. They emerge on the outside of the stadium, and there he is. Lee has never spoken with the head of the Hyuga clan before, never spoken with Niji's uncle, he's never had any need to, nor any desire. But the man is tall, imposing, and when he feels the way that Lady Hanabi shrinks a little on his back, Lee's grin swiftly becomes very, very fake. Hyuga does not even spare Lee a glance. You are the last Hyuga to emerge, he tells KO, very stern. I have ensured the safety of the elders, your lack of timeliness is unacceptable. My apologies, KO says, bowing. We were delayed. He offers up no further explanation, no details about how he would have willingly died for Lady Hanabi, had been about to die before Lee stepped in and leveled the playing field. He gives no details about how he had told Lady Hanabi to run for her life, how she had been targeted specifically, about the way that Lady Hanabi was in tears and Lee's fake smile disappears completely, and he's frowning. It is only then that Hyuga turns to him. Who are you? He asks. Why do you hold my daughter? He does not even try to smile. I am Niji's teammate, Rock Lee, he introduces himself. I was, helping KO and Lady Hanabi. Hyuga says nothing, simply turns to the still bowing KO. Come, he says. Let us go. KO straightens up, and Lady Hanabi slips off of Lee's back to land lightly on the ground, and Lee seizes his chance. He squats down in front of her. Lady Hanabi, he says, and he rests a hand on her head. It was joyous to meet you. You are very youthful, you have a bright future. If you wish to train or play together, speak to your cousin, and we can happily do such wonderful things, my lady. She smiles, just a little. Thank you, Lee. He straightens up, and nods at KO. KO, sir, it was good to meet a strong older ninja who cares so deeply for his charge. The other shinobi looks a little surprised by this, but Lee presses on. You are good and kind and strong, sir, and I will strive to follow the great example that you set, your willingness to give your all for the ones that you love, to protect them. Sir, you are truly great. Lee turns to the head of the Hyuga clan. Hyuga, he says simply, all joyfulness falling from his face. I don't like you. You're not a very kind person. I hope you will find your heart and mend your ways, but I hope we don't talk again. Thank you. And then before anyone can say anything, he turns on his heel and bolts back into the stadium, using every single bit of his weight-free speed before he spontaneously combusts, because that was so very terribly rude but also so very terribly worth it. He really hopes he won't meet Hyuga again. Kakashi realizes what the Hokage is going to do about the same time that Orochimaru does. The forming of two clones, one to deal with each Hokage? Not immediately strange. Advisable, even, but then the Hiruzen in front of Kakashi, the original, goes through an incredibly familiar sequence of seals. No. No 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 no. The Shinigami that rises behind the Hokage is the stuff of Kakashi's nightmares. This is the entity that stole away Minato-sensei, and now, it seems, it's going to steal away another Hokage, too. Tobirama is taken first. The second Hokage dissolves into nothing once the hand of the Shinigami steals his soul, but he has enough time to speak to Sarutobi, to murmur something that's too quiet for Kakashi to hear. Kakashi pops a chakra pill, just in case, and Minato-sensei is next. The man, the younger man, as terrifyingly strange as that is to say, doesn't have a moment for Sarutobi. No, he looks right past him, to where Kakashi crouches on the ground. Kakashi, he says. Please, take care of Naruto for me. A pang of guilt so fresh and hot scores through him, and Kakashi hangs his head. I haven't been doing a very good job, he says. He hasn't. There must have been some way he could have done more. Some way he could have made a difference. Please, says Minato-sensei, and Kakashi looks up to see his mentor, his teacher, his sensei, fading into starlight. We can't dwell on our mistakes, okay? Just make them better. Okay, Kakashi says, very softly. I will. Say hello to Kushina and Rin and Obito for me, will you? Minato's expression shifts into something not quite readable, not quite understandable, but as he opens his mouth, he fades into nothing and whatever it was goes unsaid. Kakashi wishes he could have stayed just a moment longer, but he pushes himself to his feet anyway, even through his exhaustion, because Orochimaru is the last one, and Kakashi doesn't think he'll go easy. At first, Kakashi hangs back. He and the Hokage have not fought side by side, and he does not want to get in the way. Besides, the Hokage is a dead man, as it is, so as long as he can perform his jutsu, as long as the Shinigami can steal Orochimaru's soul, it doesn't matter. The snakes that tangle up the Hokage and Inma don't matter, because the Hokage is within soul-stealing range and is going to do it. But the sword? The one that the Hokage had knocked to the side, that Orochimaru now beckons to life with his fingers? Oh, that makes a difference. Inma is straining at his bonds, trying desperately to reach for the sword before it manages to stab Sarutobi, but Kakashi is free. Kakashi is fast. But Kakashi is tired, and the only way that he can stop the sword is with, well. He flings himself in between Orochimaru's sword and the Hokage, and the moment it starts to enter his flesh he turns to the side, so the end point is very much away from the Hokage. It's a blinding pain, a fierce pain, being stabbed through the stomach like this. The sword moves, probably beckoned by Orochimaru's fingers, and Kakashi cries out, but he grips the sword, holds fast to it, makes sure that it stays within him and doesn't touch the Hokage even as he falls to his knees. Kakashi coughs, wetly, and tastes copper in the back of his throat. The sword moves again, shifting around within him, and it's more pain, more blood spreading across his shirt, and Kakashi wonders if Orochimaru is trying to force him to let go, but Kakashi laughs very softly. For Tenzo, and for Anko, and for his students, he'd do anything to see this bastard in the ground. Fuck you, Orochimaru, he says softly, and he thinks those are the last words that the snake bastard hears before the arm of the Shinigami fully emerges from his chest, soul in hand, and the empty body drops to the ground. Sarutobi staggers, blinks, and falls into Inma's arms, who catches him. He passes within moments, and it looks like a peaceful death. Kakashi's kind of jealous. He guesses that either way, though, he'll be able to find out what Minato-sensei was going to say in just a little bit. His vision is blacking out at the edges, and he coughs again, but the pink barrier has fallen, he can tell, and all of a sudden there are warm arms wrapped around him, cradling him oh so gently, carefully drawing out the sword that's piercing him. The wound is so large, now, that the sword really isn't holding anything in. Guy, he whispers, very softly, because there isn't even a single question as to who it is that holds him, and when he looks up, he's right. It's his rival. His Guy. Holding him, oh so carefully, even as tears run down his cheeks. Guy is a crybaby, Kakashi knows this, but now isn't the time to tease him about his ever-flowing manly tears. Kakashi, Guy whispers, just as soft. I'm so sorry. I wasn't fast enough. It takes a lot of strength, a lot of effort, but Kakashi lifts his hand, cups Guy's cheek. The man leans into the touch, and Kakashi's gloved thumb brushes the corner of his lips. Guess this means, you won, huh? Guy doesn't understand. Huh? Kakashi smiles, oh so softly. You're ahead of me by one, Guy. You won. He smiles back, gently, and softly and tenderly. I guess I did, rival. But I'd rather have you than winning. Kakashi doesn't have an answer to that. That faint, gentle smile of Guy's is the very last thing he sees before his vision gives out entirely, before even Obito's eye cannot show him anything anymore. The gentle press of Guy's lips upon his own are the last thing he feels before he slips away. Chapter 39, Konoha Crush, Part 12. The problem with fighting someone you helped train is that you both know each other's moves so easily. Anko has known for a while that Kabuto is above genin level, he just chickens out when it comes to the real deal, doesn't want to actually fight and hurt people that aren't his teacher or his teammates or Anko or Hoito and his team. A select few, really. Compare that to how Ryo always said he froze up in the middle of a mission, and well. Anko had always thought he had the skills for a Chunin, maybe even a Jounin, but not the guts. Now she just knows he was and is a fucking liar. How can you work for Orochimaru, she asks, ducking underneath a swing of his sword. He's got a new weapon that she's never seen before, a short sword that's more suited for someone smaller than him, and she has a strange feeling he took it off someone else. You know what he's done. How can you work for Konoha, he parrots, clashing Kunao against Kunao and then dodging the senbon that's aimed for his neck. They'll never forgive you for something you didn't do. You work in TNI, you know how many skeletons they have in the closet. She narrowly misses hitting an artery and then narrowly avoids getting nicked in the artery. So it's better to be awful openly. Anko asks, shaking her head. At least Konoha doesn't experiment on children. Kabuto laughs at that. Kabuto outright laughs, and it's high-pitched and maybe a little broken, and Anko comes to a halt. Do you really think that? He laughs, and he shakes his head. His smile is genuine, now, but it's not a pleasant smile. Oh, Anko-sensei. Konoha experiments on kids. I'm one of them. And before Anko can think of a single thing to say to that, the fight resumes. Kunao against Kunao, senbon, and scalpels wielded, duck under and clumsily wielding a sword, neither of them is using any ninjutsu, and Anko's not sure what to think about that. She's not using it partially because the Uchiha kid is right there and she doesn't want to accidentally catch him in the crossfire if she uses something more destructive, and partially because she just really doesn't want to hurt Kabuto. Anko doesn't know why Kabuto's not using it. Whatever reason he's not using it, though, it lets Anko get the upper hand. She nicks his arm and forces him down to the ground, wrenching his arms behind his back and holding a kunao to his neck, and then she stops. What? Asks Kabuto, and he smiles. Anko-sensei, you're not going to kill me. She can't, and he knows it. Even if he's the enemy, she just. Anko has very few precious people, has very few that are so absurdly important to her that she cannot handle it, and it's the rather unfortunate fact that Kabuto is one of those people. She'll use a knockout tag, even if there's brain damage risks behind it, and she hates to use two in one day. Orochimaru didn't abandon you, Kabuto says, and Anko freezes. What? She rasps, because that came out of nowhere, came out of absolute nowhere, and she stares down at him. The seal was a success, Kabuto says, uncaring of the knife to his neck, smiling away. He wanted you to join him. But you refused, and so he altered your memories. He didn't abandon you. You said no. It's too much. It's so much. It's a complete shattering of everything she knew and every expectation, and she doesn't understand why he's telling her this, and she thinks it's not a lie. She thinks she knows Kabuto enough to tell that it's not a lie, but she guesses she didn't know him at all, actually, but he uses the distraction. Kabuto shoves out of her grip. He whirls around, fast as can be, swiping the kunai from her hand and tackling her down, and he doesn't hesitate. Sasuke's limbs have been coming back to life, slowly but surely. First his face, his mouth is no longer numb, he can speak once more, he can move his jaw. Then his fingers, one by one. His arms. His torso. It's not a long-lasting paralytic, it seems, but even though he can move his arms, he doesn't try to throw any kunai. This is Kabuto, fighting that proctor, Mitarashi Anko, he knows this now. It was like the needle shocked sense into him, broke through the haze that covered his mind, and maybe when he's not in the middle of a battlefield, in the middle of being scared and worried and Uchiha don't get scared, he can evaluate and figure out what happened. Was it Kabuto? Was it his seal? Is he cracking, going mad, absolutely losing it? He's so concerned that it's the latter. But then Anko screams and everything falls apart in front of him. Kabuto slices through her front like butter, and it's like a worse, harsher version of the same cut that Sakura got from Orochimaru, and Sasuke is scrambling to get there as soon as he can. He has to crawl, his legs still dead, and Anko drops like a puppet with its strings cut, and oh god, oh god, oh god. There's so much blood. There's so much blood everywhere, and his breathing comes short, and quick, and all he can think of is the way the Uchiha district was once flooded with blood. He cut straight through her shirt, straight through the mesh, and there's so much blood. Sasuke presses down on the wound with his bare hands, wishing he had something, anything that could stop the bleeding, and Anko hisses. "Kid," she says, and it's soft. "It's okay. Run for it." "No," he says, and tears spring to his eyes even as his stained red hands try to stop the flow, to stem it. He knows, intellectually, that no one can lose this much blood and survive, but he turns to Kabuto, because he's still here, and Sasuke pleads. "Heal her," he begs, and he's not even ashamed of it, not at all. "I'll go with you willingly. Please, just heal her." Kabuto leans in, and one for desperate, hopeful moment, Sasuke thinks that he's listened. That he's going to heal her and stop the light that's fading from her eyes and stop the blood that coats his hands, and then Kabuto laughs, very quietly. "Goodbye, Anko-sensei," he says. There's a sharp pain at the back of his neck and everything goes black. He wakes. Sasuke doesn't twitch. Doesn't open his eyes, doesn't so much as move as he reaches out every single one of his senses to try to figure out his location. It smells of antiseptic. Of the hospital, there's breathing in the room, the sounds of multiple different people breathing, some very close by, and he opens his eyes and very carefully sits up. His team surrounds him. Naruto is dirty, his jumpsuit cut up a little but otherwise seeming entirely unharmed, sitting in a chair to the right of the bed with his upper half sprawled on the bed, asleep. Sakura is in the same position next to him, in a different chair. Her entire arms, from the tips of her fingers all the way up to her shoulders, are covered in bandages. A few mark up her face, as well, but the skin of her face mostly seems whole and healthy. She's just as passed out. To the left, Karen leans back in a chair, also asleep. She's dirty, a little bloody in spots, but Sasuke doesn't think it's hers. She's not on his bed at all, just in a chair, but she's just as fast asleep as the others. "Sasuke," says a quiet voice, a familiar one, and Sasuke tears his eyes away from his teammates to look up, and it's Kakashi. Kakashi is in a bed to his right. He looks terrible. Exhausted. He's in a hospital gown and Sasuke can see bandages peeking through underneath it, but he's here, and Sasuke very carefully slips out of bed, ignoring the wave of dizziness that shifts through him, careful not to wake Karen as he walks around the bed to Kakashi. The floor is cold against his bare feet, and the fact that he's only wearing a hospital nightgown definitely makes the air have a bit more of a chill, but he doesn't care. Kakashi, he whispers, stopping by the side of his teacher's bed. What happened? Kakashi scoots to the side very carefully, and pats the spot next to him, and after a moment Sasuke climbs up and sits next to the man on his bed. Orochimaru replaced the Kaze cage and tricked sand into invading with sound, he says, and the name of that man makes Sasuke's breath catch in the back of his throat. We won. As if that wasn't obvious already, and Sasuke shakes his head. How am I here? Kakashi's eye crinkles in a smile, just slightly. Team 10 found Asuma and told him that Kabuto was after you. He made it just in time to stop him from taking you. That. He owes Team 10 and Asuma Sensei so much, right now, but he can't let himself be relieved, just yet. What about Kabuto? And Anko? Kabuto got away, Kakashi says, very quietly. And Anko, he shakes his head. I'm sorry, Sasuke. She's dead. Sasuke shakes because God. She had put herself in the way, she hadn't needed to try to save him and yet she had, and now she's dead and her blood had been all over his hands, and he looks down, quick, just to make sure none of that red is on him anymore, and end. Kakashi wraps an arm around him and very gently pulls him into his side. Orochimaru is dead, he says, and he says it very firmly. You don't need to worry about him anymore, at least. That cuts through the panic, at least, cuts through the haze, and Sasuke turns, looks up at him. You're sure? He nods. I saw him die. Sasuke looks at Kakashi's chest, looks at the bandages that cover everything underneath his hospital gown. Is that what? Kakashi stills. Inhales, exhales. It was his sword, he says, very delicately. The Hokage used a jutsu to sacrifice himself to defeat Orochimaru, and Orochimaru tried to stop it, and, well, he shrugs, very lightly. I got in the way. Got in the way, you're going to be fine, right? He doesn't say anything for a long moment. There were a lot of internal organs damaged, he says, and he says it very quietly. The doctors don't think I'll ever be able to return to full, active duty. Oh. Kakashi had done that. Had stopped Orochimaru and brought him down, and now Orochimaru wouldn't touch him ever again, but Kakashi won't be a shinobi again, and I don't regret it, Kakashi. No, Kakashi-sensei says. I'm glad all of you are safe. Sasuke buries his face in his teacher's side, and for the first time in a very long time, he cries. Chapter 40, Aftermath, back together. Sasuke's not sure who wakes first. One moment, he's nearly falling asleep against Kakashi-sensei, curled against his teacher in a way that would leave him very embarrassed come morning, and the next, there's a hubbub of noise. His teammates cluster around their teacher's bed, every single one of them in his face, and it's both overwhelming and welcome at the same time. He didn't quite think that was possible. Are you okay? Asks Sakura, her face pinched in concern. Are you hurt anywhere? Sasuke resists the urge to touch his neck, resists the urge to clap a hand over his seal, and shrugs. I'm fine, he says. He didn't hurt me. Are you okay? She's the one who has bandages all over her arms. She's the one with bandages underneath her clothes, too, he can see that, now, under her mesh. And she had been the one screaming and nearly murdered by Gaara. But Sakura nods, tipping her head to the side and smiling, eyes closed. I'm fine, promise. I've got a healing cream all over me right now, but I'll be good as new. That's a relief. That's such a relief, and it takes a weight off of Sasuke's shoulders that he didn't even know was there. Karin grabs his hand and Sasuke flinches, but doesn't pull away. I'm sorry, she says, and her eyes shine with unshed tears. I'm sorry I let him take you. Oh, God, Sasuke's so uncomfortable. It's not your fault. Awkwardly, he gives her hand a squeeze, hoping that'll help. She squeezes back, and shakes her head. I'm sorry, she says again, but before he can say anything in response, Naruto is right in Sasuke's face. They're inches from each other, so very very close, and neither pulls back. Hey, Sasuke, Naruto says. Hey, Naruto, Sasuke says. They pause for a moment, looking at each other, even though his eyes itch, and then Sasuke asks, because he needs more than what Kakashi-sensei gave him. What happened? Their stories spill out over each other. About Anko saving Sakura and Ino going into Gaara's mind and Hinata getting hurt and Naruto allying with the Sand Team and he has a demon in him. Sasuke didn't even know that was possible. He knows about the Byakuya, of course, because he had a good education, but Sasuke didn't know until now that they could be stuck inside of people, and that's kind of a horrifying thought. Naruto frowns, just a little bit, and his hand curls in the fabric of his jacket. Yeah, he says, and he doesn't look Sasuke in the eye. He does. The three fill Sasuke in on everything, and Sakura always has her finger on the pulse, so she fills all on them on what Shikamaru and Ko were doing, which is cool. It means they captured a sound ninja. That brings back something that Sasuke's kind of been avoiding, but seems like a good time right now. He glances back at Kakashi-sensei, who is watching them all with a softness that makes Sasuke want to look away. But, still, he wants to ask, and so he does. Kakashi-sensei. What happened to the sound genin we captured? That. Kakashi-sensei lifts his hand as if to rub at the back of his neck but hisses and lowers it. Well, it seems they broke out, or were broken out, or Orochimaru used them to bring back the three Hokages. They all stare at him. He did what? Sakura says, and Kakashi-sensei has the gall to look surprised. Ma, did I not mention that? That leads into Kakashi-sensei explaining the whole fight with him and the Hokage against Orochimaru and the other Hokages, and Sasuke is very interested into the technique that Kakashi-sensei described. That he could destroy the first Hokage with his Sharingan. How did you do that? He asks. Kakashi-sensei looks very old all of a sudden. I'll tell you later, Sasuke, he says. Sasuke accepts that. Later. It's probably an Uchiha clan secret, anyway, and he shouldn't share it with Naruto and Sakura and Karen. It feels strange to think of keeping a secret from them. But beyond that, not a single one of them asks Sasuke what happened to him. None of them bring up Kabuto. None of them bring up Anko. None of them bring up Orochimaru, beyond Kakashi-sensei's describing of the fight, and not a single word is breathed about his curse seal. He doesn't know if they already know everything about it, if they're trying to treat him like glass, or if they don't care. Well, he doesn't think it's the latter. It doesn't matter. Sasuke is drained. Tired, numb, like a cloth that's been wrung out, and he slumps against Kakashi-sensei more and more as the conversation grows quieter and quieter. You can spend the night here, he hears Kakashi-sensei murmur to the others at one point, and there's the signature poof of Naruto's shadow clones as the other bed is dragged over alongside Kakashi-sensei's, so there's just one giant bed, and the other three pile in. All five of them, sharing these two beds, which is kind of cramped, certainly, but it's warm. Kakashi-sensei on one side, Naruto on the other, and then Karen and then Sakura to his left, all five of Team 7, crammed together in these tiny little beds. Sasuke is warm, and he sleeps. He's home. Sasuke's standing in the middle of the Uchiha compound, and he knows he's dreaming. The bodies scattered everywhere are ones he's memorized, positions he will never forget until his dying day, and this is normal. Nothing fun, and his breathing is starting to quicken, but normal. Little brother, says a voice, and Sasuke whirls around. It's Itachi, no, it's Kabuto, no, it's both of them, at once, two images overlaid upon each other, and it's horrifying. Little brother, he says, a smile crossing his face. Why are you here? The three sound genin rise up behind him. Their skin is gray, rotten, they're dead, as if dug up from a week-old grave, and they smile in unison. Why are you here, Sasuke? They ask, tipping their heads to the side. You're too late. They point behind him, to where he had just been facing, but when he turns, it's Obaro's neck is broken, as it had been in his death. He's sprawled on the steps of the nearest house, his head at an angle that makes Sasuke want to vomit. Karen lays at his feet, a withered husk, drained of every last scrap of chakra while blood leaks from the bites that scatter even her face. Sakura and Naruto lay next to each other, holding hands, a macabre presentation of the two people who hold him in their hearts. Glass embeds Sakura over and over again, like a pincushion of shards, her skin blackened and crackled and peeling from lightning, her mouth open in a soundless scream while her eyes stare at nothing. Naruto could be sleeping, but for the way that his whole chest is concave, like someone stepped on it and kept pushing until it burst open. Kakashi-sensei staggers in front of him, a sword through his stomach, reaching for Sasuke helplessly. "Sasuke," he says, and then he's turning into Anko, sliced open and bleeding at his feet. "Run," she tells him, and the blood rises. There's so much more than could come from a single person. It covers Sakura and Naruto, drowns Karin, laps at Obaro's feet, and then it's rising past Sasuke's ankles and then his knees and then up to his waist, and he can't move. Anko floats to the top, as if she were sleeping in a pool of water, until the blood is up to Sasuke's chest and her eyes snap open. Itachi's swirled Sharingan stares up at him. "Run!" Anko screams, and Sasuke is drowning in blood. He's drinking it, swallowing it down and choking on it, the copper coating his throat and mouth and tongue, and he clutches at his throat with both hands, but someone grabs his shoulders and it's Anko, and she stares right at him with those Sharingan eyes, the blood still streaming from her front and making the level rise higher, the light coming through growing less. "I'm one of them," she whispers, but it's Itachi's voice that says it, not hers, and not Kabuto's, and Sasuke can't understand, and then she leans forward and puts her mouth right up by his ear and "Run." He awakes choking on nothing and thrashing to be free of the covers, free of the things that hold him down, and everyone's shouting. "Sasuke," yells a voice that might be Naruto's, and he grabs his shoulders and Sasuke wrenches himself free, accidentally kicking someone in the face as he vaults over the end of the beds and curls up on the cool tile, resting his forehead against it and trying not to throw up. His mouth tastes of copper. "Sasuke," says a different voice, more tentative this time, and the Uchiha looks up to see all four of his teammates peering over the edge of the bed, looking oh so very concerned. "Oh. That's..." The boy pushes himself to his feet, and stares right at Sakura. She had been the one who spoke. She stares at him right back, and for a split second he can see her bleeding, see her bandaged arms replaced with blackened, crackled ones. "Run," whispers Anko in his head, and he turns on his heel and flees. Sasuke has no idea where he's going. He's wearing nothing but a hospital nightgown and his boxers, but he still throws himself out the first window he sees, landing hard on the ground below and ignoring the pain as he runs. It's night. It's pitch black and there's no one, and it's gently sprinkling, turning everything into mud as he runs. His feet and legs are splattered with it, as is the edge of his hospital gown, but he keeps going, keeps running, hoping no one is following him. Sasuke's mind may not know where it's going, but his feet do. They take him to the very edge of a muddy, grassy clearing and stop, because in the middle is the memorial stone. He takes one step forward. Then two. Then 3, then 4, 5, 6, and he's walking up to the memorial stone, both dreading and looking for the one thing he is fearing, Anko's name. But it's not there. There's nothing but smooth rock, at the very end, where Anko's name and the Hokage's name should be, and Sasuke realizes they must have not added it yet. His fingers travel backwards, skimming up the lines of names to find his usual one, the name he always seeks out, Uchiha Obito. Sasuke finds it, runs his fingers across it, and then closes his eyes. He had wondered, before, a simple wonder. Why a month between exams? It seemed like a conspiracy, then, like he stumbled across a secret that would help him for the future, but it wasn't. No. A month to plan a battle strategy, more like. A month to decide upon a jutsu that will kill you but save your whole village, Sasuke thinks, a month to decide that your village is more important than yourself, and he feels bad for ever doubting the Hokage. A simple secret. "I'm one of them," Itachi's voice echoes in his head, and Sasuke flinches. He doesn't want this. He wants to mourn. Wants to mourn over Anko, and then get stronger so that nothing like this will ever again, that no one will die in front of him, that Itachi and Kabuto won't hurt anyone else. He wants to try to go forward, because it feels like for every step he takes 2 backwards, and he's tired of doing nothing, being nothing. "I'm one of them," Itachi whispers, and Sasuke is frightened. A conspiracy behind the gap in exams? The whims of a child. Trying to learn more about Uzushio? Well, only natural, given his teammate. Besides, finding out information about other villages is hardly bad. But, this? I'm one of them, says the Whisper, and Sasuke thinks if he opens this box, there's no going back. Anko-sensei, Sasuke breathes against the stone. I don't know what to do. Check the description for the links to the author.